Thank you for joining us in another episode of the Poetry of Predicament. This podcast is produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance. Living Resilience exists to offer transformative support and resources to the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities around the world. Our sole purpose is to curate and offer coaching, support groups, courses, and events that assist people in expanding their core skills, competencies, and capacities for facing a troubled, predicament-laden, yet still ineffably miraculous world. All right. So this is Saturday, February 10th. And here on the West Coast, gosh, we've already spent 20 minutes of the time. This is Dean Walker, the host of this book club. And we are just hacking our way through the tangle of what I've created instead of a clear, clean link to each episode of this. We have now had 2 times of substantial confusion. So I will do my best to have this be the last of those times. Those of you who are watching the recording because of that tangle, again, my apologies. And we're off and running. So this is the second session of this book club, and in which we are reading and exploring the book of Mark Nepo, Surviving Storms. And I am enchanted and so deeply appreciative of his work and how it has shown up as a tremendous amount of overlap with, there's a body of work behind the book club and behind, if you all are familiar with the Poetry of Predicament podcast, which is a YouTube channel that we also do, that many people find out about it about this work through the podcast. And in this body of work, at the center of it is what got us into this predicament is our assertion that what got us into this predicament is our disconnection from all the primary sources of relationship and meaning in a human life. That's a pretty wild and large assertion, to be sure, but it keeps showing up in my experience that it's pretty dang close to the scale of what's happened in the background. And there's a particular part of Mark Nepo's this section in this second get-together, where he starts to talk about having a center that we can return to, or a center that we may have lost along the way in this path of life. And that's exactly the term that's at the center of this body of work. So I'm stunned and appreciative and so on. I'm wondering if we could start with just a brief check-in, a minute or so of just letting us know how you're doing, what you're landing in this, at the beginning of this session with each other with, and perhaps just a word or two of what you might have been similarly moved by in your reading of this week's material. So is there anybody who would be willing to check in and get yourself just a bit more present by sharing with us?
I'll check in.
Thank you.
I'm Doug Chase, and I like the book so far. I haven't read the whole book, but well into it, and it's very enjoyable reading. It's it kind of flows like water, kind of floats along, and you kind of drop into the little like, ooh, that's a really interesting thought. I like, for me, the perspective is one between storms that are more local and storms that are more global. And I mean that both personally and, you know, culturally.
Yeah.
So I see the storms as applied to me personally with, you know, life and death and sickness and health and all the things and joy and all that kind of jazz. But I also see it more globally. I'm starting to marry this book in its narrowness of another book called Fourth Turning. Strauss Howe wrote, and he feels that we're in that fourth turning, which is essentially not to be inflammatory, but it's a crisis stage of culture and society, and that creates its own storm that seems to be quite large. And so I'm finding it nice to be able to marry these two things together, because the other one is very technical and very analytical and very fact, and this one seems to get more spiritual and more into the personal aspect. I like that.
Got it. Great. Thank you for checking in, Douglas, and good to have you here. You missed last time, and I didn't know to put you on the list, so I have put you on the list, and I've also posted kind of the essence of a second email that I sent out with the suggested readings for each week from here out. So that might be a little bit more helpful to help you focus, or to have us all be, you know, somewhat similarly focused. And so,
Sure.
Again, thanks for checking in, and I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Anybody next?
I'll jump in because I could kind of follow what Bill was saying and what you just said, Dean. I'm also involved in a lot of things, and I sign up for more things than I actually get involved with because it sounds good. And then when the meeting actually comes, it's like, nah. And I am developing kind of my sifter, I guess, is what I'm doing. Is I try things, and is it fitting into whatever I'm either building or stripping away? I mean, I don't even understand the process here. And Bill, I hope you stay. I've enjoyed the few times I've been able to talk to you. I think I really like reading this right now, Nepo, because this is what I feel like I'm doing. I'm trying to understand what is in here. And he quoted William Stafford, whom I liked, and I lived right down the street from his widow's house for many years, so I'm aware of his work. And I love it. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world and follow the wrong guide home. We may miss our star. And so I'm still trying to understand the person I am to meet the people out there. And I'm enjoying that process of trying to understand. And I really believe the truth that he and other people are saying is that we do need to bring our true selves here or out in the world. And so I feel like I'm withdrawing, but I understand I'm only withdrawing to try to enter the world more than I have previously as a very introverted person. So I find it just a really fascinating time. And with regards to the stuff out there, especially the information about where we all might be, I just don't find that helpful anymore. I mean, I'm in this day, and anything that just weighs me down, and that seems to be so much out there. If it is weighing me down, I just have to turn away from it now. And I know a lot of people consider that really irresponsible, but I don't know how else to try to walk through these times. So that's where I am this morning.
Beautiful, Judy. I resonate with so much of what you just shared. Thank you so much.
And to follow that up, one of the statements in the chapters that we were reading this week was that the process is the teacher. It will teach us what we need to do, and each of us are at different stages of our own process and at different stages as far as being in collectivity of consciousness shifting. So, you know, it all adds together. We go through our own thing, and then as we make ourselves better, we make the world better. There was that one thing by Marie Curie. I just wanted to read. It's really short. You can hope to build a better world without improve. You cannot. Let's start over again. You cannot hope to build a better world without improving the individuals. To that end, each of us must work for his or her own improvement, and at the same time share a general responsibility for all of humanity. And I think that's what Mark Nepo is teaching us, trying to teach us. You know, this book is is written almost in a poetry praise, a phrase, praise of poetry. All the words are just put together almost perfectly, you know, and doesn't seem to be any extraneous meanderings. He says what he needs to say as delicately and poetically as possible, even using a narrative, and with some of his own. And he's a very famous poet anyway. So I think that just goes along with the way he is internally and the way he exhibits himself externally. And I really like this. I haven't finished it either. Like Doug, I'm pretty good way into it, but I got about a third left, I think. So I'm looking forward to finishing that up maybe this week. And I'm glad to be here with you folks. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Bob. In terms of my own check-in, I've already mentioned just how absolutely delighted I am of the overlap, the apparent overlap between Mark Nepo's work in surviving storms and the core of our work in living resilience, this body of work and the courses and support groups and so on that are behind the book club and the more forward-facing elements. I've been studying for quite a while in a realm that my mentors like to call soul work. And one of those is Francis Weller, who just completed a 5-month training with us with 400 people. It's just quite an online crew about leading ritual and soul work, and primarily with a focus on grief rituals and the like. And I've been deeply moved and fed by Francis's work over the years. And I'm finding a very similar thing. You know, ironically, I found out about Mark Nepo through Francis Weller. Francis includes an awful lot of poetry in his ritual work. And I feel a deep kinship and appreciation for soul work as a path. And I think it seems like I have no choice but to be choosing soul work, and some of the aspects of that I have found most important. One of them is that it really requires a slowing down and it requires a digging my hands into the mud of life, the life-giving mud and the darkness of the mud and the sometimes coldness and clamminess of the mud and so on. And that is a process that just takes the time that it does. And it involves the essence or the core elements that it does. And Bob, I love what you just said. You know, that I think Mark Nepo's true gift, in not only his poetry, but his teaching, is he has this ability to include just enough story, just enough context or history, but saying the essential pieces with just enough words. It's artful. He is artful in that, and I very much appreciate it. So, you know, I'm not at all surprised, and it's really every course that or every event and every group that we start up in the various cycles of that here in Living Resilience. There's always the competition, the severe, the fierce competition for our attention by the fire hose of reality out there. And I absolutely have compassion for the choices that one might want to make. You know, there could be other choices that you find are more important than to spend time here. I completely understand. And I'm just for myself finding it a precious slowing down. I'm finding that that is something that is really important to me at this time, handling some of the heartbreaks and some of the extraordinary deep inspiration of these times. I've got to slow down to be able to be present to those. So that's me checking in. So again, thank you all for coming through the tangle again, and I will do everything in my power to have that be the last entanglement of that kind. And I'm curious if there's anyone who would like to start us out with something that may have struck you, something that you can easily recall that you'd like to mention about any of the elements this time. And if you've had a chance to look into the chat and perhaps click on the document that I've included, that is essentially what came in the most recent email. And especially it gives you a little menu of suggested reading for each of the sessions to come. You may have read far further than that. You might not be up to the particular suggested level. That's completely fine. And I'm curious if there's anything that anyone would like to start us out with that, you know, yeah, I'd like to mention that was important in some way, or that moved me in some way. And if not, if anyone doesn't, I have plenty, but I tend to talk a bit too much anyway. So what do you got?
On page 38, Martin Niemöller has that poem that he wrote after being in the concentration camps in World War II about not speaking up and about feeling bad about being neutral and indifferent. You know, to me, modernity is trying to keep us neutral and indifferent so that we stay out of their business so they can keep doing what they're doing. keep us mollified, and
Yeah.
they wanted to supply all our wants and needs after telling us what all our needs and wants should be. And so the more we look inside and less outside, because it's just going to get worse on the outside. I mean, with AI out there now, you just don't know what to believe.
Mhm.
You know, I believe we are who ourselves are this morning. A year from now, I'm not sure, you know,
Yeah.
but so, you know, it's going to, that helps me to think that, yeah, I'm going to have to get more strength from within and not definitely get out of the herd, you know, and find my own way, and hopefully other people can find their own way. And it doesn't have to be that everybody's finding the same way. That's not the point. But anyway, that was really just, you know, I'd read that before, and I really liked it. And but it made me think of that. So
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bob. I noticed that really ever since starting the research for my book, The Impossible Conversation, and coming to some of the same conclusions that you're talking about, that it's quite possible that how collapse will actually show up is with a whimper, with a long silence wrapped around just a whimpering kind of fizzle. And there's something that really has struck me about that. Yeah, anyway, I'm feels like I'm resonating an awful lot with some of the concerns you've just said. Thank you.
I will say one more thing about that, though.
Yeah.
And it's something I haven't gelled on yet, but as that long drawn out whimper happens, I don't want to feel like was neutral or indifferent.
Mhm.
And if I have to be mad, not unkindly mad, but if I have to be opposing, lovingly opposing,
Mhm.
then fervently loving and opposing, then that's okay as far as I'm concerned. As
Yeah.
long as all those parts are together.
Anybody else from that particular zone in the first couple of suggested elements? That one is the purpose of goodness is what Bob's talking about, and toward the end of that, the really very famous poem or quote about first they came for the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so yeah. Anything more for anybody else about the purpose of goodness?
I'm reading on the Kindle, so my pages don't jive, so I may not know when to jump in with something I've highlighted. Just so
Yeah.
you know.
I have two, and I don't know if your Kindle is like mine. I'm actually reading that on the screen right now, and in the table of contents, it actually does give page numbers, and so you can get in the ballpark anyway, and zone in pretty quickly. Was there anything you wanted to mention, Judy, or?
Well, I mean, I highlight a lot, and this morning I was trying to go back to the highlights and highlight the highlights, so I knew what I might want to say. And so two things. well, a couple that I might say is I had highlighted the state of being wholly alive below the prevailing patterns of the world is not a state of excellence, but a state of connectedness.
Yes.
It's more important to be thorough than perfect. Yes, I want things to be clear when I write or speak. I work on what comes through me that it might ring true, but it's more important to speak the truth roughly than not at all. And so I keep coming back, and then several pages later, the central question then are, will you be a good steward of the portion of the universal spirit you are blessed to carry in the container that is your life? What does being a good steward of the light you carry look like you for personally? And I've been such a head person all my life. I mean, I like to think I have a good mind. It's not firing as fast as it used to when I was a young person. It used to be really, really fast. And now I'm not. And I didn't even realize there's any other way to go through life. I once had, I'll embarrass the men in the room. I was once having an appointment with a gynecologist, and this happened to be a man, and I had a specific question about a lady part, and he wanted to know where that part was in my, in my lady parts. There was a specific spot, and I told him it's closer to me, which I meant it was closer to my head than where he was. And what an absurd thing to tell someone when they are touching your body to say it's closer to me. So that's how ingrained I am that who I am is clearly right behind my eyes. And
Yeah.
only in the last few years, I've been part of a centering prayer group for 6 years. Literally only in the last couple of years have I understood that there's more to me. There is a body in particular, and that there's this heart or spirit inside. And intellectually, I knew that, but I couldn't ever feel it. And I'm still in that process of trying to be a person in a body that is able to sense things. It's like I've been walking around as a box, not understanding that the box could be opened. And so what does that mean, that I have a bit of that universal spirit in me and to want to share it? And how would I share it, even roughly, my truth? Because if I try to understand it specifically, I'm still really lost. And so I'm trying, I've felt like I've always all my life brought who I am to any situation, because I don't know how not to do that. I don't know how to put on social masks or any of that. But I'm trying to bring some other parts of me to people now, and I'm still struggling with how to do that. And so I'm struggling with how to recognize those parts in other people. Not that most people share that anyway. Does that make sense?
Completely for me. Is there anyone else that has a response for Judy? Because that's, for me, that's rich territory you're describing, Judy. Whether it's conscious, which is obviously this is conscious for you, that you've had that head orientation and you are really, really reaching to expand the definition of who you are into a more embodied state, is what I'm hearing you say. And I can't imagine a more important journey to be taking at this time, because on the soul work path, it has to be embodied. It's by definition, it's embodied. So I just thank you for your vulnerability and honesty and sharing. Thank you. Anybody else resonance with or a comment about that journey?
Yeah, for the first 45 years of my life, I lived in that world, Judy. But and I think I was I love this expression that I got from a spiritual writer. My mind was colonized by the church. Was a very rich expression, which kind of described a lot of my journey. But I lived and believed what other people told me, and I was mostly in my head. And and it wasn't until after that I I went into a program which helped me change my path and begin to and I went to 20 years of therapy, which helped me a lot to begin to look inside and see that there was more to me than what other people told me how to live and what to do and big things of that nature. So yeah, it's so it was then 45 years letting go of everything I was taught, you know. So yeah, I could resonate with that a lot.
Thank you. Sounds like you've had a long, rich path yourself, Bill.
Yeah, well, I once I realized um, that my mind was captivated by other forces, um, and I began to experience some freedom. I just kept looking for teachers, and I found, some incredible teachers along the way, which helped me to slowly, it's a slow process, you
Hmm.
know, realizing there's a whole other world out there, and in myself as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I resonate also with being in the mind for years and thinking the intellect and reasoning power were what mattered. And, but then finding out that wasn't the right way to look at things and being able to change. So that, but that phrase that he had, that the process is the teacher, lets me not worry about the final outcome, but it lets me go through day to day the process, learning every day. Where that ends up is not a, it's not a goal. Uh, it's whatever's going to happen, as long as I stay sincere and true about it. The process. Another famous teacher that I followed also said that pain is a great teacher. Things that happen to us, things that cause us suffering, not physical suffering, all that may be part of it too, but the psychological things, the things that got us off centered, put us in the waves and the winds of the storm. That pain is what will allow us to learn more about where the joy is at. So going through life and all its bumps and ups and downs is a good thing, as long as we have the right focus and understand that it's the process is what's going to teach us. Whatever comes our way is what we need. If we can learn from everything, then we'll be on the right path, and we can feel good about that. We can feel good about being on the path, regardless of what else is the thing of the day, or the thing of the month, or whatever else is outside of us.
Yeah.
Could I jump in there?
Yeah.
That notion of the way, and you're trying to find your own way through that. And maybe you're in a painful experience and you're knowing there's a lesson, right? I ordered another Mark Nepo book because it intrigued me, and I buy used, so it takes forever to get here. But I think on the back or something, or on a blurb of that book, he said something like, "What's in the way is the way," which kind of is what you're talking about, perhaps, Bob, if I'm hearing you right, like this thing that's upsetting you or something maybe is your path. But a couple days ago in the Book of Awakening, he almost used the same words to convey a different or almost an opposite message. He was relating a story. He went with a friend to, I don't know if it was Montreal or something, a big Canadian city, to visit a very large Chinese garden. And sorry about that light. He was so, I can't get rid of it. He was so excited, and they got there and the gate was locked. And he just about had a tantrum, just like, "I can't believe it. We came all this way and the gate's locked," and all that. And his friend just starts walking around this big exterior wall. And he's like, he just sounds like he literally was having a tantrum. "How long are we going to do this? This place is huge. You know, it's city blocks." And before he went too far, having his little breakdown, the wall disappears. It was only meant to give you the facade. And then the entire rest of this Chinese garden was open. And his point is, if you get stuck on what's in the way, you're never going to get there. So my question to Mark Nepo is, how do we know which is which? How do we know what's in front of us as a teaching experience and the thing we need to move through and learn? And how do we know sometimes we're just not facing in the wrong direction? Now, who's supposed to help us with that?
Hmm.
I don't know if that's a contradiction or not. Maybe one follows the other. Maybe you maybe you find the wall, and in finding the wall, you know you've got to find your way around the wall each time. And so
That's the
if
lesson.
what you need right then is to find the wall, you'll find the wall, whatever circumstance it happens to be. And then finding the way around the wall is the follow-on part of it. It seems like, I don't know.
That makes sense.
I'm getting more coffee. You bet.
All right. So I'm noticing that our time, is racing ahead. Again, I'm just kicking myself for our late start, but I'd like to just jump ahead. And if you have anything from the prior chapters or segments, please feel free to bring it up. But I'm jumping ahead to grow what we know, which is a chapter that starts up on page 49 for those who are looking at page numbers. And right below the startup of that is what I was describing, but just my appreciation and excitement of how much overlap there is in a number of different ways in the core of what I believe Mark Nepo is including in this book and what I'm including in this body of work, and particularly that I believe we are a culture that is both individually and collectively off-center, that we are disconnected and we are off-center, and that has us on a self-terminating track. That's the essence of what I built this work around. And it's not a requirement for anybody to specifically believe as I believe, or find that my assertions are correct or not. I think there's a tremendous amount of usefulness to the various practices that are offered and ways that we come together in our support groups and so on, no matter where a person is on this spectrum of how we engage with this predicament. But I would just like to read a paragraph from this "To Grow What We Know" chapter. And you know, he's talking there about two major schools of thought regarding education throughout human history. One school of thought is the effort to confirm and preserve what we already know. And the other school is to grow what we know, to expand it, to go into new territory. So it's in that chapter that he, amongst others, that he spells out his relationship with this idea of being off-center. The more insecure or off-center we are, the more we labor outwardly to have everything and everyone mirror us, when often that insecurity is an indication that we need to go deeper into the ground of our experience in order to renew our direct connection with life. That's literally almost word for word out of the curriculum, if you will, of this body of work in living resilience. Our inner stability, or lack of it, triggers a psycho-spiritual form of cause and effect. The more insecure we are, the more we need to impose our views on everything and everyone. The more secure we are, the more room we make for other views of life. So how do we prepare ourselves to fully experience the web of life? This evokes the practice of being human, which is not telling people how to be in the world, but encouraging individuals to devote themselves to discerning and inhabiting their own journey in getting up when falling down, in lifting themselves out of despair, in returning to a sense of safety when feeling afraid, and in opening up after pain or trauma has closed them down. I would just add one more, and that is a fierce commitment to being present to what is actually occurring in this world. I'm surprised actually that he doesn't include it. I believe he implies it later, so perhaps we'll talk about that later. But I think those are each so basic, so essential to what it is to be a human being, leaning into a future and a present that is the most challenging in human history. I can't imagine more essential suggestions. So that's just me telling you about something that struck me in a good way, in a simple way. And at that level of simplicity, that level of slowed down considering, that I was telling you, that that's what I consider this work to be, this soul work. I'd be happy if anybody had a comment or a reflection about what I've just read. And the floor is completely open if you're inclined to go in a different direction.
For me, it's comes back to something that Judy referred to as well, bringing those two together. But there was a book written by Mary O'Malley, which was entitled, "What is in the Way is the Way." That was the title of her book.
Mm.
And it was a wonderful read for me. I think it was one of my transformational books. But and I just love it because I think we so often ignore what the distasteful thing that we are dealing with, and we try to go to someplace else. And just to sit with that distasteful thing and that difficult thing or that bad experience or whatever it is I think the most growthful thing we can do.
Hmm.
And I think it ties into something that you were saying as well, Dean, you know, but I think it's easy to push away the storm that's happening all around us, or to push away that difficult relationship, or to push away the aggravating thing that happened 10 minutes ago. And that's where life is, right? And we tend to push that away and not spend time with it. So rather than just sitting with that for 10 minutes and finding out how we are reacting to it and what's going on inside of us, tend to run on to the next thing. But that was just a thought that came into my mind.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. That reminds me of one of the core concepts that I have been bumped face first into dozens of times since writing my book, which is I believe that our only real superpower, particularly is in the USA, as we're the pinnacle of the business as usual paradigm, is the only superpower that we actually embody or have taken on and have mastered is the superpower of overriding relationship, overriding the cues that would come from our insides if we were to allow ourselves to be perceptive, to listen to them. But we have learned to suppress them. And that has brought us to where we are. That is what it is to truly be off center. So, yeah, thank you. Seems like there are threads that we could develop over a cup of tea or two, and for an entire afternoon if we wanted to, if we had the space to share with each other. Anybody else with a reaction or a response to anything that Bill said or that I read, or a different thread you'd like to start up?
I think it's connected to what you read and then what you just said about the overriding. I think one of my major frustrations, because I do long for connection, and how I typically do that is I love to talk about ideas. I mean, I can't do social chit chat. I can't do cocktail parties, but that's why I'm in book groups. But I think about our polarization in this country and the other side from my side, and how it's not so much to me that people might have different views or different concerns that animate their views. It's like I feel like I'm not ever hearing their views. I'm hearing the overwritten talk radio, Fox News, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. And if I had one of those people in front of me, believe me, I would love to engage, not to try to convince them. It was just like, I don't get it. Explain to me. And then I'm pretty sure what I'm going to hear is a parroting of the views. And it's like, no, I want to get under that. I want to understand like why you personally maybe feel like immigrants are an issue. Like, tell me about your hometown. Is there some issues? Because I've always said, convince me I'm wrong. That would be the most exciting thing for me, to see that blindness. I would like that. And I'm just saying that because that's engaging, that's learning, that's growing. And I do feel like more and more people have these layers and layers on top of them. And I might have mentioned it in last group when I was reading that Brene Brown, is that the more tribal we become and the more armed campy we become, the lonelier we are.
Yeah.
And how is that possible to be in your tribe, you know, and you're all shouting the same thing, and yet you're more disconnected than ever?
Yeah.
And that's just fascinating. And it must be that, you know, accretion of layer after layer of just pretty much shit that, you know, as we move through the society we live in, it's not good stuff that's clinging to us, no
Yeah.
matter what side you're on.
Mm.
And we're not touching anymore. And one of the things he said in our selection this week is that those moments of connection, of connecting the strings and tying the universe back together through that one small kindness. And I guess it's not a superpower, but the one thing I do is I smile a lot. I smile at strangers. I smile at people in the grocery store. And you know, maybe a smile to a certain person on a certain day is one gift to the universe. I don't do much else,
Mhm.
but I do smile.
Yeah. Hmm. Thank you, Judy. Hmm.
What Judy just said made me think that, you know, we're taught at a young age to believe others and get away from our centeredness, get away from our perception of who we are deep down, like he talks about in his book, how he felt like he was a child. He was able to hold on to it. Most people aren't. They're thrown into the herd and told that the herd is what they should believe. And so automatically I got a type of cognitive dissonance, you know, between what they're feeling inside and what they're following. You know, I mean, some people take it hook, line, and sinker, and that happens. You know, that's okay. But most people still feel and have things come up. If life were that good and your herd was that good, you would never be unhappy. You know, but when the walls come, or the boxes they put you in are there, or the pain is there, then you can feel something that your herd's not telling you or teaching you, something from yourself. And if we can do what he did, get back to where we can hold on to that regardless of what happens, where we are in the storm, that's the whole point. We'll figure it out. If we stay true to that, the path will unfold. And whatever it is that we're supposed to do in this lifetime, we'll get closer to it. One more smile at a grocery store, you know, whatever. So that just made me think of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. Douglas, you doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Yeah, it's nice. Your comments kind of take me down one little rabbit hole. I have to stop myself and pull myself back into the present, and then somebody will say something else that pulls me down another little rabbit hole, and I have to stop myself, get myself back in the present. On a more political local level, I forget the guy's name, wrote a book, and it's common it's been talked about a lot, and the fact that we're not really 50 states, we're more like, I forget, is it 11 nations?
Mhm.
I think it's what it was.
Mhm.
Based on immigration and culture that came with those immigrants, which still are very entrenched in the fundamental thinkings and underpinnings of how people view the aristocrat, bureaucracy, government, culture, tribalism. All of those things are based really on where you came from, and how that really forms a lot of the political orientation that the United States has. And that just gets worse with time, because under stress, people tend to pull back to their more fundamental thinkings. But then the other rabbit hole I go down to, I'm listening to, I'm actually watching a TV show series from National Geographic. I can't remember the name of it. I even watched 3 episodes. It's not Living Planet, but anyway, it gives a history through CGI that's just over the top, incredible, of the history of Earth and the mass extinctions that went through, and the physicality of the Earth and how it affected Earth life, and how life kept evolving and changing, and the great extinctions that occurred. And so a lot of the stresses and strains that we're feeling here with climate change and acidification and desertification and overpopulation and on we go, to create all these storms that he's talking about, and how to navigate through those. He talks about diffusing the storms. The storms will abate, that they will diffuse, and as they do, what lays there in front of you. I haven't gone farther into the book to say, well, what about the storms where ultimate destruction happens? There's still, at the end of the day, something. And I guess starting to find within myself a greater piece of not just a 30,000-foot view, but the 100-mile above Earth view, and the fact that you can argue that we are here and we have agency and we can make these decisions, and isn't it sad that we're not doing this or doing that? One could argue that this is way beyond the hubris of our intellect being able to handle and deal with what we do. That what we do is something that's happened, that has evolved over hundreds or millions of years, not just the 500,000 years or the 50,000 years that we look kind of like humans, but there's intrinsic stuff that's in there that it goes back far, 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 far greater than that, and that there is a greater what's the word? There's just more to Earth than we possibly can fathom. And the fact of our demise or our change or our crisis and how it all unfolds, there will be something at the end of that day. And I guess I take comfort in that. I guess I take comfort in the fact that I'm not the apex predator. The Mother Nature is the apex, and how that all works is frankly beyond me, but I know it works and will work. And we say, oh, isn't it sad we're going to lose the Amazon, or we're going to lose the boreal forest, or whatever. This has happened time and time again over the eons of Earth, and it reshapes itself, it re-evolves. We're just passing on. We got into this oil thing, and it took our basic tendencies and supercharged them. But at the end of the day, it is a storm that will pass, and we will pass with it. And how we deal with the storms and create those survival skills for us in the moment, and value the things that are intrinsic to us. Being a tribal animal, being wanting to have connections and the things that we're talking about here that we've lost. I couldn't agree more. And I think those are definitely valuable things to hunt for and to find and to share.
There is one part that I feel a little bit of discord or disagreement with Mark Nepo. I think he's a little bit more of an optimist than I am about our core intentions all along the way. What has ended up creating what we call the global culture, the business as usual culture that's got us where we are now, with all of its miracles and beauty and all of its predicament. And he has one line where he says, "I firmly believe that the functional aim of all education has always been to give one more time than others take." So I'm gonna just start it again. Sorry, it's been awkward. "I firmly believe that the functional aim of all education has always been to give one more time than others take, to get up one more time than we fall down, and to open up our hearts one more time than the storms of life close them." Now, I believe that those are all very, very admirable features that a human being could choose to embody. That's great. I don't, however, believe that or experience that the functional aim of all education has been toward that kind of lovely aim. I wish he had designed education for the last 1,000 years. I love it. I think it's something to hope for or to aspire to. And I don't experience that has been at the core of how human beings have put together education, at least in modern times, to be sure. He goes on to say just a little bit more. Repeatedly, love and suffering break the trance of single point thinking. Then we realize, as Einstein affirmed, that there are many centers and that the web of their connection reveals a oneness that sustains all life. We participate in this oneness by being thoroughly ourselves, which leads us to life-changing moments in which we are one with each other and all of existence. Being ourselves until we are one is the relational paradox that is the heartbeat of the universe. So again, that part, I would say, is almost a word for word overlap with the work that we've put together here in Living Resilience. And it just makes me happy. Do my little happy dance over here when I experience someone so articulate and so in direct contact, evidently, with what he's writing about. I'm curious if that aspirational statement and perhaps directly experienced statement from Mark Nepo, and I believe for myself as well, I'm wondering if there's anything about it that rings directly in your experience. And I'd be happy to read it again if somehow it was too fast or not clear.
A couple of things. He might have been referring to the systems of education throughout time. Which have changed, every decade or for thousands of years. I mean, what you've learned, what man has grown to know is now part of the standard, and you learn what can be known up to that time. But he also says the other part is to continue to grow all the time, which is adding to the total. So I don't know if he's necessarily talking about the systems of education as much as the format of education, whether it belongs to the culture or the system or the individual.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what popped into my head.
Mhm.
If it's more individual, then it's fine. Then as long as we exhibit that love, but continue to want to grow, then we can add to the total of the knowledge. And it's fine to know that, but we got to continue to grow to add to the total.
Yeah.
And where that total is, and what that total ends up, what that total ends up totaling to. That's kind of a bad phrase, but is changing all the time, and it may be like Einstein was referring that, you know, and the thing that is holds me in place is knowing that there are things beyond the reasoning and mental level that's out there, and then that's what will help bring us to better connectedness over time once we learn that kind of thing, or relearn it actually, because it used to be that way tens of thousands of years ago, and then we morphed away from that. But if we can get back to that and still have the understanding that we have of all the knowledge that was gained until then, all the total is still there, but then the way we look at it, the way we reconnect will be the important part. Anyway, that's the way it feels like when you were talking about that. So.
Thank you, Bob. We're coming toward the last couple of minutes here, which I'd like to ask that each of us would just say a couple of words of what we're left with after our time together, and perhaps how I'd summarize my invitation to y'all out of what I just read, which is in the little section called "To Grow What We Know." Is I'm just asking the question, how do we make sense of our self-terminating direction? How have we gone 30 years knowing full well the consequences that are out ahead of us just for climate change, which I consider a very small part of the predicament we're facing? How is it that we are still, perhaps more than ever, on a self-terminating track? How do we justify it to ourselves? What are our motivations? What is it that keeps us from that level of connection that would have us perhaps muster more care than self-importance, which is roughly what one of the distinctions he offers. So I would ask that perhaps you could just keep that question with you as you read the next week's elements, and let me know what you come up with. I truly have no answers here, none. It doesn't get any better week by week with the fire hose of content that comes. So could we just briefly check out? And I will say that I'm checking out with appreciation very much for your patience with the breakdown at the beginning, and so much appreciation for the depth that each of y'all are bringing as you share into this conversation today. Thank you. Judy, you got something?
I guess I'm leaving with, I enjoyed what Doug had said. There's the part of me that definitely takes that very impersonal view that has no grief at all. It's just like, this is the nature of things. And I can hold that and believe that. And the other part of me is the part that, I didn't read that passage as education per se, but as the spiritual traditions have taught this oneness, this connection, and the journey of life and spirituality, and understanding all that, those are not mutually exclusive at all. And that I want to be on the one journey while staying like, yeah, this over here has always happened, and it doesn't matter when I'm looking toward my heart. It doesn't matter what happens out there. The sun could explode. It's still the same journey here as long as I'm alive. So I just love holding them both.
Beautiful. Wow, thank you.
Yeah, I'll tag team on that. I well put.
Mhm.
It reminds me of that last scene in what's that movie? Don't Look Up,
Mhm.
where extinction is minutes away, and they're holding that, but at the same time, they're enjoying the moment and the presence and the community of the people at the dinner table,
Yeah.
and that's what they value at the end of life, and as we all should. So.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Douglas. Really good to have you here, and I hope we get to see more of you.
Yeah, I guess the thought that comes to me is just embrace the moment, and that's all, the only thing that's real.
Thank you, Bill.
I can't beat those closings, so I'll just appreciate.
All right. So thank you all, and I will be sending out refreshed, absolutely accurate and active links to you all, and also links to a couple of recent video clips that I've put together into short little nuggets that involve Mark Nepo, and possibly one other one that's slightly longer that's part of the curriculum from one of our courses, and that I hope you'll find useful if you decide to watch it. So thank you so much for bringing yourselves so fully to today, and I look forward to seeing you in about a week. Bye. Thank you for joining us in another episode of the Poetry of Predicament. This podcast is produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance. Living Resilience exists to offer transformative support and resources to the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities around the world. Our sole purpose is to curate and offer coaching, support groups, courses, and events that assist people in expanding their core skills, competencies, and capacities for facing a troubled, predicament-laden, yet still ineffably miraculous world.